The old farmhouse on the edge of town had always seemed to carry secrets. Its walls were thick, the kind that seemed to trap air inside and keep out the noise of the world. The bricks were cracked, the paint long gone, leaving behind a skin of rough gray stone. Windows sagged in their frames, and the roof looked like it might collapse if one more storm came through. Yet, for all its decay, the house remained standing, silent and still, as if it were waiting for something. Few people went near it, not because of any story that was told out loud, but because of the feeling it gave off, the weight of something unsettled. Inside, the air was heavy, with the stale smell of dust and damp wood. Light came in only through narrow cracks, cutting across the rooms like sharp blades. The floors creaked in complaint with every step, and the wallpaper peeled away in long strips that hung like loose skin. To anyone else, it was just another forgotten home, the kind scattered across back roads where no one wanted to live anymore. But hidden deep in the walls was a secret no one expected to find. Letters, dozens of them, stuffed into cracks and gaps, written in ink that had turned brown with age. The words inside them weren't written to family or friends. They were written to the devil himself. Before those letters were discovered, life in the town seemed calm, almost ordinary. This was the kind of place where nothing much happened, where the biggest news might be a car accident on the highway or a new family moving in. Neighbors knew each other, even if only by name, and gossip filled the spaces between their daily routines. Parents sent their children to the same school they had gone to. Everyone shopped at the same grocery store, attended the same church on Sundays, and waved out of habit when they passed on the road. On the surface, it was safe, familiar, even boring. That was the mask the town wore. Behind closed doors, things weren't as simple. Families held on to grudges that stretched back years. Old money clashed with new money, and those without much of either were reminded of where they stood. There was always a quiet divide, the kind no one admitted openly, but everyone felt. Some people carried themselves with the weight of control, as if their position in life gave them the right to decide how others should live. And others, tired of being watched and judged, learned to hide their real selves in the shadows of polite smiles. Among the people tied to the house, there was a sense of restlessness, though it wasn't always clear to outsiders. The family who once lived there had been respected, even envied. They had land, wealth, and a name that carried power. But what people saw from the outside was only the surface. Inside the house, the balance of control shifted constantly. Love often looked more like possession, and trust was twisted into something sharp. Arguments could be heard at night, muffled by the thick walls, leaving neighbors uneasy but unwilling to interfere. And yet, in the morning, the family appeared at church, standing together in the same pew, dressed neatly, their voices blending with the hymns as though nothing was wrong for RS. Those tensions stayed locked inside the house, hidden from the world. But there were small signs if anyone paid close enough attention. Children who avoided looking into their parents' eyes. A wife whose laughter never reached her face. A husband who seemed to speak for everyone but listened to no one. Even the servants who came and went carried stories in their silence, though none dared to tell them. It was a house of control, of secrets pressed down until they could no longer move. The letters, long before they were found, were born out of this atmosphere, written with a hand that trembled between fear and desire. They begged and pleaded for power, for release, for revenge. Each one seemed to bleed with desperation, the ink almost cutting into the paper. Whoever wrote them believed they were speaking directly to something dark, something that could give them what they could not take in life. They weren't prayers, not in the way most people prayed. They were bargains at first glance. It was easy to dismiss the letters as madness, the ramblings of someone lost in their own mind. But when read closely, there was more. There were names written in the margins, dates, events that matched real moments in the family's life. The words weren't just thoughts. They were tied to reality. Someone had written to the devil, asking for things no human should ever ask for. And in some cases, what they asked for had come true. That house, with its heavy silence and crumbling walls, wasn't just a forgotten piece of the past. It was a vessel for something darker, something that had been whispered into its very foundation. And when the truth began to crawl out from the cracks, when the letters were finally pulled into the light, the lives of those connected to it unraveled piece by piece. What had seemed like an ordinary town, with its steady routines and familiar faces, would never look the same again. It started with the house. It always started with the house. The unease inside the old farmhouse grew slowly, like a sickness that spread through every room and every person who lived there. On the outside, the family still appeared composed, still keeping up the show that had earned them respect in the community. But within the walls, where no one could see, the cracks deepened. Conversations that should have been simple became sharp. Trust slipped into suspicion, and every look, every word, seemed to carry weight far heavier than it should. The father, once admired for his authority and calm presence, began to show another side. His voice, once steady, grew louder, quicker to snap. He demanded order, but his rules shifted without warning, leaving the rest of the household tense and guessing what might anger him next. Behind his eyes was something restless, a need to control more tightly, as if the family itself was slipping away from him. His wife felt it first, in the way he watched her, in the way he corrected her, even in the smallest things. When she laughed too freely, he silenced her with a glance. When she spoke in a way he did not like, he interrupted, rewriting her words in front of others. Each time it happened, a small piece of her faded. Though she hid it well, the children, too, began to feel the weight of his temper. The eldest son had once been his pride, the one meant to carry tea. He family name forward, but lately he had become a disappointment in his father's eyes. His grades slipped, his shoulders slumped, and whispers of rebellion surfaced. He came home later than he should, sometimes smelling faintly of smoke or drink, though he swore otherwise. To his father, this was weakness, disrespect, a direct insult to everything he had worked for. Their arguments grew louder, sometimes echoing through the halls well into the night. Neighbors who lived close enough admitted, much later, that they had heard the shouting, but had chosen to look the other way. The younger daughter, quiet and watchful, seemed invisible in the shadow of it all. But she was not untouched. She absorbed everything. The slammed doors, the whispered threats, the silence that lingered after the fights. At school, she kept her head down, answering teachers in the smallest voice possible. But at night, alone in her room, she wrote in secret. She wrote about her fears, her anger, and sometimes about things no child should ever think about. Some of her words matched the desperate pleas that would later be found on the walls. Money, too, became a growing source of tension. The family's wealth had always been their armor, the thing that kept them above others. But behind the curtain, the truth was different. Land that once brought in profit no longer did. Debts began to stack, though few outside the family knew it. Pride kept them from admitting their struggles, and instead, they clung harder to appearances. The father pushed his son to find work, to bring in money quickly, but the boy resisted, unwilling to bow to a man he felt no longer deserved respect. The mother, desperate to keep the peace, tried to cut corners quietly, selling jewelry, delaying payments, but each act of desperation only fed the shame that already lingered in the house. Secrets added fuel to the fire. The mother, though quiet and obedient in public, carried a hidden bitterness. She had given her youth, her choices, her freedom to the marriage, and in return, she was silenced, reduced to an image of loyalty she no longer felt. In private, she confided to her sister in letters that she dreamed of leaving, of taking the children away. She never sent those letters. Instead, she folded them tightly, hiding them in drawers, her silent rebellion pressed into paper. The eldest son carried secrets, too. His late nights were not always innocent. He had been meeting with someone the family would never have approved of, a girl from town whose family was considered beneath them. Their relationship was full of passion, but also full of defiance. To him, she represented freedom, a life away from the suffocating rules of the house. But he also knew that if his father discovered the truth, there would be consequences he could not control. The secrecy added to his anger, his reckless behavior. Every time he returned home, he felt the weight of both shame and rebellion pressing on him. Even the servants, those who worked quietly in the background, carried stories that would later matter. One in particular, a woman who had been with the family for years, noticed things others ignored. She saw the bruises hidden beneath sleeves, the tears wiped away quickly, the way doors were locked when they never used to be. She, too, kept her silence, afraid of losing her position, afraid of what might happen if she spoke out. But her silence was heavy, and when she finally shared what she had seen, it would paint the picture of a family already crumbling long before the letters surfaced. As the months dragged on, the arguments turned sharper, the silences more dangerous. Objects were thrown, words turned to threats. The house that once stood as a symbol of power now felt like a cage. Each member of the family carried their own storm, and those storms began to clash in ways that could not be undone. The father, in his need for control, grew harsher. The mother, in her quiet resistance, grew colder. The son grew more reckless, the daughter more withdrawn. And somewhere among it all, someone began to write letters in secret, tucking them into the walls as though hiding them from both God and man. The words in those letters revealed what could not be said aloud. Pleas for freedom, promises of loyalty to something darker, anger carved into sentences. One letter asked for the strength to fight back against the father's rule. Another begged for a way to escape the suffocating weight of the family name. And some were far more sinister, wishes for death, for silence, for the end of certain lives. Whoever wrote them had crossed the line between thought and desire, between secret fear and dangerous hope. It was not only the family that pressed against the edge of collapse. The town itself added to the tension. People expected perfection from this family. They expected donations at church, attendance at events, and a constant reminder that the family's wealth meant they were better. The father felt this most, carrying the burden of appearances, pushing his family harder when they faltered. To fall from grace in this town was to lose everything. That fear haunted him, turning his love into something cruel. Past grievances returned, too. Old disputes with neighbors over land and money bubbled up again. Rumors of betrayal, whispers of affairs, and accusations of dishonesty spread in quiet corners. Some people longed to see the family fall, jealous of the power they had held for so long. The isolation only grew, feeding the sense that the family stood alone, surrounded by enemies both inside and out. And so the tension thickened, choking the air inside the house. Every glance was loaded, every silence a warning. The father's footsteps in the hall could silence a room. The mother's quiet defiance became sharper. The son's rebellion grew more dangerous. The daughter's silence deepened into something heavy and haunting. And through it all, the letters multiplied, hidden inside the walls, waiting for the day they would be found. The breaking point was not sudden. It was built layer by layer, until the house itself seemed to pulse with it. It was in the slammed doors, the broken plates, the bruises hidden from view. It was in the desperate scribbles of ink pressed into paper and stuffed into cracks. Words never meant to be seen, but meant to carry power. The house became not just a home, but a container for every secret, every wound, every plea. And once those walls were opened, there would be no hiding what had been buried inside them. The night the crime unfolded was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that made the house itself feel alive, holding its breath. The storm outside rattled the windows, wind howling through the cracks, rain slamming against the roof. Inside, every room seemed colder, every shadow longer. The farmhouse was suffocating with tension, a weight that had been building for months, and now pressed down on everyone trapped within its walls. No one spoke, but the air between them was thick with things unsaid. It started with another argument, louder than usual. The father's voice, sharp and commanding, echoed down the hallway. His son had returned late again, reeking of smoke and defiance. The confrontation sparked like fire against dry wood. Accusations flew, failure, betrayal, shame. The son, usually quick to bow his head, stood taller this time, his anger raw and trembling. He shouted back, words that burned, words he knew would cut deep. His F. Adler's hand curled into a fist before the boy even finished. The mother stood frozen at the doorway, her face pale in the flickering light of the oil lamp. She had tried before to calm them, to play peacemaker, but this was beyond her. The storm outside blended with the storm inside. She watched as her husband advanced, his voice rising, his finger jabbing in the boy's chest. The daughter sat at the top of the stairs, knees pulled to her chest, eyes wide, the banister cold against her skin. She dared not move, dared not breathe too loudly, but she saw everything. The argument crashed into violence. The father's slap landed hard, the crack of it louder than the thunder outside. The boy's head snapped to the side, his lip bleeding instantly. But he did not retreat. Something in him, long suppressed, snapped. He shoved back, his hand shaking but strong. Furniture tipped. The lamp wobbled dangerously, shadows leaping across the walls. The fight became physical, brutal, two wills colliding after years of resentment. The mother screamed for them to stop, but her voice drowned beneath their rage. She grabbed her husband's arm, tried to pull him back, but he shook her off so violently that she stumbled into the wall. Her head struck hard, and for a moment she slid down, clutching her skull, dazed and breathless. Blood trickled between her fingers. The daughter covered her mouth upstairs, her body trembling as she fought the urge to cry out. In the chaos, the boy's hands found something solid, a candlestick from the mantel. Heavy, cold, iron. His breath came fast, his heart pounding so loud it filled his ears. His father lunged again, fury burning in his eyes, and in that split second, the boy lifted the candlestick high. He swung, the sound was sickening. A dull, wet crack that silenced the storm inside the house, even if only for a heartbeat. His father staggered, eyes wide with shock, blood already running from his temple. He reached out, as if to grab hold of something, but his knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the wooden floor. His body hit hard, the thud echoing through the hall. The candlestick clattered from the boy's trembling hand. Silence followed, the kind that empties a room of air, leaving nothing but the pounding of blood in the ears. The boy stared, his chest heaving, his hands shaking uncontrollably. His father lay motionless, blood pooling beneath his head, seeping into the cracks of the floorboards. The mother crawled forward, her fingers brushing his face, her cries breaking through the silence. She screamed his name over and over, but he didn't move. The storm outside raged, but inside the house, everything felt still, broken, final. The boy backed away, his body pressed against the wall. His mind spun with terror and disbelief. He had wanted it to stop. The shouting, the fists, the endless demands, but now it had stopped in the worst way. He whispered apologies no one heard, his voice too soft, his throat tight. His sister, still crouched upstairs, finally let out a sob, small and strangled, the sound of innocence shattering. The mother's grief quickly twisted into fury. She turned on her son, her eyes wide and wild, tears streaking her face. Her voice cracked as she screamed at him, asking what he had done, how he could do such a thing. She struck his chest with her fists, but he did not fight back. He stood there, numb, absorbing her rage as though it were deserved punishment. Each blow, each word sank into him, but he did not move. He could not. Panic soon replaced her anger. She realized what this meant, the shame, the scandal, the ruin that would fall on them all, if anyone knew. Her hands shook as she pressed a cloth to her husband's wound, though she knew it was pointless. Her eyes darted around the room, searching, thinking, already moving toward denial, toward survival. She whispered frantically, saying they had to make it look like an accident, that no one could ever know what really happened here. Her son shook his head, whispering no, whispering that he hadn't meant it. But her fear swallowed her grief. Together, with trembling hands, they dragged the body. The floorboards groaned beneath the weight, streaked with blood. The daughter, still frozen on the stairs, couldn't look away. She watched her mother and brother pull the man who had once been their anchor through the halls like something already forgotten. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to move. The mother's mind worked frantically, piecing together lies before the truth could escape. She told her son to clean the floor, to burn his shirt, and to stay silent no matter what. Her voice was sharp, urgent, desperate. She spoke as though the crime could be erased if only they worked quickly enough. But the bloodstains clung stubbornly, the metallic scent filling the air, impossible to hide. The son obeyed in a haze, his hands raw from scrubbing, his eyes red with tears. Every drop of blood seemed like a stain on his soul. He could still feel the weight of the candlestick, the moment of impact, the way his father's eyes had widened in shock. He would carry that image forever, no matter how much his mother begged him to forget. The body was hidden in the cellar, a dark, damp place that seemed to swallow everything. They laid him on the cold ground, covering him with an old sheet. The mother's breath came fast, her body trembling, but her mind never stopped calculating. She told herself it was necessary, that she was protecting her children, her family's name. But inside, she was splintering, her grief and her fear pulling her in two directions at once. The immediate aftermath was chaos masked as control. The daughter finally crept down the stairs, her small voice trembling as she asked if he was really gone. Her mother silenced her with a look so sharp it cut. The boy sat against the wall, his face pale, his eyes empty. He muttered to himself, apologies, prayers, pleas for forgiveness. But no, one answered him. That night, the house did not sleep. The storm outside eventually faded, but the storm inside never would. Every creak of the floor, every howl of wind, felt like a reminder of what had been done. The walls, thick and silent, seemed to absorb the crime, keeping it trapped within. Letters written to the devil were no longer just secret wishes hidden in cracks. They were prophecies fulfilled. The darkness that had been invited into the house now sat with them, watching, waiting. And when morning came, the sun rose over a house that looked the same as it always had. But inside, nothing would ever be the same again. The crime had been committed, the silence had been sealed, and the weight of what they had done pressed into the bones of the house, into the lives of everyone who survived that night. Morning did not bring peace. The house smelled of blood and bleach, the air heavy and strange, like it carried a memory no one could wash away. The family moved through the rooms with quiet, almost mechanical motions, as if pretending everything was normal might erase what had happened only hours before. But their faces betrayed them, the son pale and hollow-eyed, the mother stiff and trembling, the daughter silent and withdrawn. The body in the cellar weighed on all of them, even when they tried not to look in that direction. The son was the first to break. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. His hands shook whenever he picked something up, and his eyes carried the emptiness of someone already halfway gone. He whispered to himself in corners, replaying the moment, the sound of the candlestick connecting, the sight of his father collapsing. Guilt pressed against him from all sides, relentless and suffocating. He thought of turning himself in, of confessing everything, but each time he opened his mouth, his mother's voice silenced him. She clung to control, desperate to keep their secret buried. Every time her son faltered, she reminded him of what would happen if the truth came out. The scandal, the shame, the ruin of their name. She told him he had no choice, that this was survival, that they could not undo what was already done. Her words sounded strong, but at night she wept alone, the sound muffled into her pillow. She felt the weight of widowhood without dignity, the kind that came from lies instead of sympathy. She tried to convince herself she was protecting her children, but deep down, she knew she was also protecting her pride. The daughter carried the silence differently. She said nothing, spoke to no one, but her eyes saw everything. At school, her teachers noticed how quiet she had become, how she stared out the window during lessons, her pencil unmoving. She stopped playing with other children, stopped laughing. She carried a secret too heavy for her small frame, and though she never told anyone what she had seen, it lived in her drawings. Dark sketches of bleeding figures, houses on fire, faceless shadows looming over smaller ones. As days turned into weeks, the family story began to unravel. At first, they told neighbors the father had left suddenly on business, that he would return soon. But as time passed, people grew suspicious. Whispers began to spread. Why had he left Witho? UT telling anyone? Why hadn't letters or calls arrived? The family's once solid reputation now fed curiosity, and curiosity turned into gossip. The mother tried to maintain appearances. She dressed in fine clothes, attended church, and forced smiles that cracked at the edges. But the community noticed. They noticed her eyes swollen from crying, the way her son slouched in the pew beside her, the way the daughter refused to look at anyone. They noticed the absence of the man who had always stood tall at the front of the church. Rumors thickened, swirling through town like smoke. Some said he had abandoned them. Others whispered of debt, of secret affairs, of disgrace too heavy to bear. And beneath it all, darker rumors emerged. Murmurs of violence, of things hidden behind the walls of that old farmhouse. People began to avoid the family, crossing the street instead of offering greetings, lowering their voices when a mother entered a room. The very respect that had once shielded them now sharpened into suspicion. Inside the house, denial gave way to collapse. The son grew more unstable. He drank. He disappeared for hours, sometimes for days, only to return looking more broken each time. He spoke to his sister in hushed tones, confessing that he saw his father's face in mirrors, heard his voice in the walls. The girl, too afraid to answer, simply listened. Each night, she tucked herself under the blankets, but the silence of the house made her believe her father still roamed its halls, watching. The mother clung to routines, cooking meals no one touched, polishing silver no one used. She buried herself in work, in appearances, in anything that could distract her from the body in the cellar. But she couldn't escape it. Each creak of the floorboards reminded her of what lay beneath. Each letter she found tucked inside the walls. Those desperate pleas to the devil felt like a curse left behind to mock her. She burned some of them, but others she could not bring herself to destroy, as though destroying them might erase proof of what had really been festering inside her home. When the truth finally began to leak into the open, it did not come from them. It came from others who had noticed too much. The servants whispered. The neighbors questioned. Soon, lawmen knocked on the farmhouse door, asking to speak with the mother. She stood tall, her hands folded, her voice calm as she lied. She said her husband had left, said she knew no more. But the cracks in her story showed, and the eyes of the town turned sharper, more watchful. The psychological toll broke each of them in different ways. The son, crushed under guilt, grew reckless, almost inviting suspicion as if some part of him longed to be caught. The daughter grew haunted, her silence mistaken for shyness by some, but those close enough to see knew it was fear. The mother aged in weeks what should have taken years, her beauty dimming, her confidence faltering. She had always believed reputation was everything, but now reputation was the very thing choking her. The farmhouse itself became a symbol of unease. Once admired for its size and strength, it now drew uneasy stares. Children whispered stories about it at school, daring each other to run up to its porch at night. Adults spoke of the family in hushed tones, shaking their heads. And when talk of strange noises, of shadows moving past windows long after midnight, GHD began to spread. The house shifted from a place of pride to a place of fear. The community's view of the family turned from respect to pity, and from pity to disdain. Their name, once untouchable, became a warning. Friends distanced themselves. Business ties frayed. Invitations stopped arriving. The family became ghosts in their own town, seen but avoided, acknowledged but unwelcome. No one could point to proof yet, but everyone felt it, the sense that something dark and irreversible had happened in that house. A man was gone. A family was breaking up, and the silence that hung over them was louder than any confession. The immediate aftermath of the crime was not just blood and panic. It was the slow decay that followed. Denial turned into guilt, guilt into paranoia, paranoia into isolation. Each of them carried the weight differently, but all of them carried it. And though the walls of the farmhouse kept their secret for now, the weight of it pressed harder every day, seeping into their lives, their minds, their very souls. The crime had not ended with the blow of a candlestick. It lived on, in every room, every glance, every whisper in town. And though they tried to bury it, the truth had a way of clawing its way back to the surface. In the end, the truth could not stay buried. Secrets have a way of clawing themselves to the surface, no matter how carefully they're hidden. The cellar that had held the body was eventually opened, the walls that had held the letters torn apart. What was once silence became evidence, and what was once gossip became fact. The family that had worked so desperately to keep their name intact now stood exposed, stripped of their illusions. The son was the first to break under questioning. His guilt, already eating him alive, left him with no strength to lie. He confessed in a voice shaking with tears, describing the fight, the rage, the blow that ended his father's life. He admitted the candlestick had felt heavy in his hands, admitted the sight of his father's blood had haunted him every night since. He did not try to justify it, only whispered that he hadn't meant to kill him, that he only wanted him to stop. The mother, confronted with his confession, tried at first to stand firm. She spoke of protection, of appearances, of saving what was left of her family. But when the letters were brought forward, letters hidden in the walls, letters that spoke of rage and desperate bargains with the devil, her defenses cracked. Her own words, written in moments of weakness, were among them. Pleas for freedom, for release from a marriage that had caged her. They were not proof of murder, but they were proof of motive, proof of a house soaked in bitterness long before the final blow. The daughter, small and silent, became the truest witness. She told what she had seen from the stairs, the shouting, the strike, the fall. Her voice was soft, broken, but unshakable. The court room grew quiet as she spoke, every word carrying the weight of innocence lost. By the time she finished, there was no room left for denial. Justice, in its legal form, was served. The son was sentenced, not to the gallows as some demanded, but to years behind bars. His act was seen as one born of rage and desperation rather than cold-blooded planning. But still, he carried the label of killer for the rest of his life. The mother, though not charged with murder, was condemned by public opinion. Her role in hiding the crime, in silencing the truth, marked her as complicit. She lived with that judgment daily, each glance from the townspeople a reminder of her fall from grace. The daughter, too young to face punishment, carried scars that no sentence could measure. She grew up shadowed by what she had witnessed, by the weight of a family name no longer respected. Trust did not come easily to her. Joy rarely lasted. Even in adulthood, she struggled with silence, afraid that speaking too much might bring ruin again. For the community, the crime left a wound that lingered. The family had once been a pillar, a symbol of wealth and stability. Their collapse shook the town's sense of order, stripping away the illusion that power or reputation could shield anyone from tragedy. Neighbors who had once envied them now spoke their name with a mix of disgust and pity. The farmhouse itself became a place of dread, a reminder that beneath polished surfaces can lie something rotten, waiting to be uncovered. The case became more than just a family tragedy. It became a story told for years, a cautionary tale of what happens when control becomes cruelty, when silence becomes complicity. It revealed the fractures in societal expectations, the pressure to appear perfect, the demand to uphold reputation at any cost, the shame that kept people from admitting they needed help. It forced the town to face its own role, too. The neighbors who had heard shouting but turned away, the servants who had seen bruises but stayed quiet, the community that praised appearances while ignoring reality. In reflecting on it all, questions of morality remained tangled. Was the son's act murder, or was it a desperate defense against years of oppression? Was the mother a victim of her husband's control, or was she an accomplice in a lie that ruined them all? Was the daughter doomed by what she saw, Or did her voice finally bring truth to light? The answers were never simple. They never are. What the letters revealed most of all was the complexity of human need, the longing for freedom, the hunger for power, the desperation for release. To some, those words to the devil were madness. To others, they were honest, the kind of raw truth people dare not say out loud. They showed the darkness people carry when they feel trapped, when love turns into control, when silence becomes unbearable. In the end, justice was served by law, but justice in the deeper sense was less clear. Lives were destroyed, innocence was lost, and the community was left to wrestle with the uncomfortable truth that no family, no matter how wealthy or respected, is free from the dangers of silence, pride, and fear. The farmhouse still stands, though empty now, its walls scarred by time and by the secrets once hidden inside them. Some say it carries a presence, that the air inside is thick and restless, that the house remembers. Whether that's true or not, the story lingers, not just in the town, but in the lessons it forces us to confront about power, about silence, about the fragile line between love and control, and about the terrible things people are capable of when they feel they have no way out. And so the story closes not with peace, but with reflection. A family is gone, a community forever changed, and the letters written in desperation remain as echoes of human weakness and human need. They are reminders that beneath every surface, no matter how polished, something darker may be waiting, whispering, asking to be heard.